everybody. I'm Sergei Kosaretsky. I'm moderator of this special session. Welcome. Thank you for coming, and let me present our session. We consider our session as a starting point for the preparation of the report, The Transformation of General Education System in the BRICS countries. The initiator of the report is the Institute of Education, High School of Economics, and we're very pleased that this initiative has found the support of the BRICS Civil Society Forum, which provided us with the avenue for the presentation, this idea, and the project team. Thank you very much. We are grateful for the response to our invitation from researchers from the leading universities, China, Brasilia, India, South Africa, leading universities, government and non-governmental organizations. We have an excellent professional team. Our group and the idea of this year's report includes the former BRICS countries, but we really hope that in the future we will expand like the BRICS, and the next report will cover new members and their leading experts. But now your attention and feedback are very much in demand right now. We hear a lot about reimagining and reinforced education to meet the challenges of the future in recent years. But the agenda for shaping education to meet the needs of sustainable development has been formed primarily by global organizations, which have defined the concepts of the quality, equity, inclusion in indicators, as well as the criteria and tools for assessing it, and universal solution for transforming education. But in the process, they have often lost sight of or inadequately accounted for the specific social, demographic, economic, and cultural characteristics of the many countries that, by virtue of their divergent societal values and traditions. However, recognizing the value of cultural authenticity in educational policy not only allows for contextualizing promising global solutions, but also for using exciting social cultural resources as a component in generating high-quality, equitable educational opportunities. Such resources may pertain to linguistic diversity, national pedagogical traditions, geographical and cultural opportunities for open education, and the social and cultural capital of school communities. The BRICS countries provide not only a vivid example of the concentration of these types of resources, but also of an emerging sense of agency in the identification and use it. And at this session, we will talk about the general and special aspects of the BRICS countries' approach to transforming general basic education system in response to local and global challenges. Almost half of all students of the world study in the BRICS countries. The solutions of these countries, the lessons of their reforms are on undoubted value for other countries. We have three main questions for discussion after speeches. What are the specific features of the national educational systems of the BRICS countries that make it possible to create high-quality, accessible education? What are the trends and prospects for transforming the general education system of the BRICS countries? And what is the agenda for cooperation about BRICS universities and researchers to support the success of national strategies in education? Our speakers, the members of our team, Andrea Guea, Professor, Federal University of Paraná, member of National Association for Research and Postgraduate Studies in Education, Brasilia. Professor Feng Zhaolin, China, Professor and Assistant Dean, School of Education, Shanghai Jiao Tong University. Professor Vandana Saxena, India, University of Delhi. And our friend from South Africa, Phumzile Nokuthula Langa, Director for Rural Education, National Department of Basic Education. And the member of our speech, which we hope will take part in the discussion, Joana Mendoza, University of Santa Carolina, Brasilia. She's very serious. Okay, let's start our presentations, and I'll give the floor Professor Andrea Guea.
Thank you. Hello, I'm very happy about this opportunity and a little nervous, but I consider an honor to participate with this important debate in the context of the BRICS Civil Forum. I would like to thank our host at the moment, Professor Sergey, for this attention and this dedication for building this meeting and this possibility. I'm organizing a short presentation on the challenge and maybe solutions from a Brazilian perspective. I would like to start with 4 characteristics of Brazilian education that are important for understand the challenges and some of the controversies in Brazil. Brazil is a federation, and in this context, the states and the municipalities have a relative autonomy in education. Relative because we have a national curriculum and I strongly have large-scale assessment system, but the municipalities and the states have possibilities for change a little aspects. The second question is the right to education and the role and responsibilities of states in providing education are a constitutional premise. It's a strong premise. For 70 years of age, schooling is compulsory in Brazil. The country has several strategies for popular participation in the debate of public policies. This is very important for understanding our challenges and our solutions. In education, a milestone for participation is the National Education Conference, which discusses guidelines for the formulation of the National Educational Plan. This plan is a 10-year law that needs to be approved by the Congress. The last National Educational Conference has just taken place in this year, in January, and put together 2,000 people, professors, students, academics, social movements. Is very important space. And we are in this stage where the National Education Plan law is being processed in Congress very soon, we hope. This is a summary drawing of our education system. There are 2 levels, basic education and higher education. And we have subdivisions in basic education and stages and modalities. It's a complex, I don't have time for explaining all, but I put points in the. It's a complex system with action by states, municipalities, and the federal government. In 2003, we had 47 million students in basic education, and the diversity of subjects and contexts is an important factor for understanding Brazil education. This is a picture for examples: quilombola schools, indigenous schools, rural area schools in the riverside. It's different for country schools, inclusive education, bilingual deaf education, education for young people and adults. It's a very diversity and rich experiences in the education. But as well as being diversity, the system is very unequal too. The graph shows one dimension of this inequality, the difference of almost 3 years in average schooling between the richest 25% and the poorest 25%. This means that the majority of the poorest are unable to finish secondary school. It's a big gap in Brazil. Other dimensions of inequality are the location of the schools, rural or urban, whether it is in south or southeast of the country or in north and nordest of the country, whether it is in this capital or big cities or small cities in countries. We also have a challenge with regards to ethnic racial profile of the students, especially Black students and indigenous. There are many current challenges, but I'm going to mention four that I think are more structural in the system. Inequality in school infrastructure conditions, laboratories, libraries, internet access, teachers' condition, I have 4 points. Inequality in school infrastructure conditions, teachers' conditions, special pay and working conditions. Teachers' salaries in Brazil depend on the level of the development of the municipality or state and not in connected with your training or experience. And the third challenge is the access to secondary school and high school education. And the school hours, a small percentage of full-time schools in Brazil. This is challenges, but behind these challenges, today we also live under controversial aspects in education policies. Many, but I think about two. First, an excessive emphasis on exams in their results, with consequences for the financing conditions of the school, competition, etc. This process have increased the pressure on teachers and students without guarantee improved learning. And the other big question is the privatization process in management of schools in different states and municipalities, which introduces disconnected forms of organization between principals, directors, and school teams. And I think an anomaly in the system that is the organization of civic-military schools that emphasize a hierarchical organization that is unrelated to the national education project. Finally, as perspectives for solving challenges and controversies, we can think of a few points. Increasing researches for education. This is a continuous challenge in Brazil and in the great part of the global south. Improve investment in teachers in terms of salaries and especially work conditions. And it is urgent to think about alternatives for monitoring the quality of education. Here, it seems to me that a contribution is possible in the context of dialogues between BRICS countries, because the BRICS populace and cultural diversity have connections. I leave two questions. What kind of indicators respond to the need to overcome inequalities with equity and dialogue with the schools community? Can we develop another perspective for working with educational indicators? I think BRICS standard with intercultural dialogue. It seems to me that using quality indicators, we can be more articulate with the diverse cultural universe of the BRICS country. Thus, we could think together about the continuous transformation that education needs in face of topics such as inclusion and diversity in school systems, technology development articulate with the role of the teachers, climate changes, and the use of data, for example. I hope for good dialogues from the Global South in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Guerra. I ask you to keep your questions. You can ask it after all presentations. And now I'd like to give the floor to Professor Feng.
Thank you. Did my slides? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. This is the second time I came to Moscow. I came to Moscow 10 years ago. Last time I joined an international ranking forum. Yeah, last time we're talking about the Russian universities' performance on international rankings. So I'm very glad to accept this invitation to work with our BRICS colleagues to propose this educational development agenda from the perspective of the BRICS and from the global source. So I titled this presentation with what we have done before and what we are facing now in education. Okay. I think you may have heard the 5-year plan in China. This is the plans are formulated every 5 years and to establish the central policy direction for the future reform and the development in the next 5 years. So I just listed the 5 years plans of these years, and the black lines are the themes of that plans. So I think by analyzing the 5-year plans from the past 2 decades, the progress and advancement of education in China can be easily summarized. Okay. When we look back at these educational strategies in the past 2 decades, if you ask me, only you can use one word to describe this path, the word is reform. If I use 2 words, reform, reform. 3 words and triple reform. And there are several, I think, features. First is how to develop large scales of education in resource-strained settings. The tactics Chinese taken is to concentrate education resources on selected ones, selected schools, selected fields. So these tactics makes rapid development possible with limited resource. And the second is governing education development through laws and regulations. Governing through legislation reflects the advancement of modernization in China. So in the past decades, we have enacted the compulsory education law, the higher education law, the vocational education law, and even promote private education law. And also regulations on preschool education, special educations are implemented. So that's the second factor. The third one I want to mention is to taking the efficiency and equity both in consideration. So for those lower performed schools, the government will provide additional support to them. Additional fundings, additional infrastructure investment policies, teaching personnel are allocated to those. And the fourth is to encourage and discuss and supporting the education diversification. So there are a series of policies have been implemented to support and encourage non-state actors in managing school at all levels, from the kindergarten to the university and colleges. And as I mentioned before, we even enact a law that's called promote private education promote law to encourage the non-state actors. So that's, yeah. Then we comes to the challenge, I think. I think the first and direct challenge is the new technology revolution. New technologies are emerging every year, even every few months. There are some breakthroughs are happening. So to educate our next generations how to live in a digital world, in a virtual world, I think they are challenges for us. The second challenge is increasing in recent years, the geopolitics and deglobalization. The relations among nations, among regions, even among continents are undergoing changes. So in China, we are dealing with the trade tariff, the chip sanction, etc., etc., etc. So to educate our children, to cultivate their ability to carry out the cross-cultural communication are challenges. And the third one, the last, is the long-term challenge to the global common good. As there are many panelists and speakers have mentioned today, our planet is at danger. Species extinction, global warming is becoming global boiling, according to the UN General Secretary. So we are all on the same boat, and the boat is sinking. So to educate our students to be global citizens, to cultivate their world responsibilities, to do global common good, in my thought, this one is the greatest challenge we face. And then in terms of the opportunities, I think the first opportunity is we are at the developing stage from large to strong. After years of development, we have large GDPs, large populations, large number of scientific papers published internationally, and many large numbers on other indicators. So all these larges are the basis and the foundations to be good. So I think that's the opportunity. We can have the high quality knowledge, human resources, and education. The second opportunity, I think, this is a new game. So when we continue to concentrate on the old games, we are increasing the trade deals, more independent on international market. Interestingly, we found there's a new game launched. The existing world governance and international orders are undergoing changes. So when this new game starts, that's okay. The internet and the social media bring the enough information to everyone. So thanks for the information exploration. We are all at the same starting line in this new game. I think that's compared to before, this is an opportunity. And last opportunity, back to our forum, the Global South have the attention to propose our own perspective, present our concept of the future world. So closer relationship, more collaborations, deeper understandings, and strong partnerships are all opportunities. So finally, I am confident that we can grasp these opportunities to educate our people, our next generation to face and finally conquer this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Feng, for such inspiration presentation. And Professor Vandana.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the wonderful time that we are having at Moscow. The credit goes to you and the entire team which is sitting here. So I bring you certain thoughts from India. As I go through the presentation, you will see that India is at a very interesting point of, at a very interesting juncture at this moment when it comes to school education, rather all the stages of education, but most specifically for school education. So I'll take you through this. I've taken a bit of liberty and added this slide, which is not the BRICS slide, but that's conventionally how I start all my presentations, you know. So namaste, everyone. Very humbly, I acknowledge the contribution of my parents, teachers, students, and family in bringing me to this forum. Thank you. Another thing that we do in all the formal presentations is to present a conflict of interest statement. I report no conflict of interest in this presentation. I think when we talk about India, like in the morning also when India was introduced to us in the inaugural session, I just thought that a bit of timeline may be important for us to understand. This is very typically from a historical point of view. This is not related to education, but it's important to understand when we talk about the context of India in 2024. We started in 2500 BC, that is before Christ. And that gives us a time of kind of a timeline. And all these incidents that I've written, I can take a complete day explaining them up. But I'm just trying to tell you that all through these almost 5,000 years in the documented history, which is not mythology, it is accepted history of the world, we are around 5,000 years old, and there have been a lot of cultural, political, economical interventions in the whole context of India. The map of India has been redefined in the last 5,000 years, and where we are right now, it looks like a smaller part of it. But that's okay, we are happy with this. Yeah, not that we can do something about it. So this is where we are. When we talk about education, it's important to understand the entire kind of, what do we say, social fabric of the country, how the communities would have been. So when we look at India at this moment, we have absolutely strong agrarian societies where agriculture is the only kind of, profession which the communities are going ahead with. And we also have a Silicon Valley where a lot of technology is happening, and all this is happening within our square kilometers in India. I also took this little bit of liberty in saying that July 1497, India continent welcomed Vasco da Gama. It's important for us to understand why I wrote this. It seems that for the rest of the world, India came into existence after 1497, which is not okay. We were there, and this gentleman came in, and we were like, okay, you're very welcome, and take us to the world around now. So it's important for us to understand for the existence and for the documentation of the historical and the cultural context of India that we understand this sequence. So the purpose of the slide was that. As I said earlier, that it automatically means that the diversity and that multiple forms of diversity are immense in our country. I was in a university at USA last year, and we were watching a game of football, American football, not the soccer. And the president of the university was sitting with us, and we just got into conversation. He said, okay, they were talking about, there was a person from Russia also. We had a Fulbright scholar from Russia. And they started talking, okay, I love this jazz, I love this music. And then he turned up to me and he said, Vandana, what form of music do you have in India? I said, sir, I can't give you in a line. There's so many forms of music that I have in India. So I think culture of India, architecture and monument, whoever came wanted to register their presence, that they were here, so they made some kind of a monument. So the architectural diversity in India is immense. So clothing, religion, festival, everything. Since this is not the major point of focus, I'm not spending much time, but what is important for us is childhood and parenting. Because we are a very diverse community, the patterns of childhood and diversity are also multiple. I thought these are the prerequisites for us to understand how we go ahead in the conversation ahead. Quality education for all. India has come up with a new education policy, which was adopted in 2020. We are very recent, and we are in a phase of implementing this policy across all the stages. The most important part of this policy is, that it talks about quality education for all. So there are people who are talking about education for all, but this is first document in the history of India, independent India, that quality has been added before education. Earlier, it was like educating people. We even have kind of, references where people say that literacy, 100% literacy, the state has 100% literacy, but that essentially does not mean education or quality education. So the policy aims at taking everyone together for those quality educational experiences. The purpose of education is also very well, it has elaborated the purpose. So the colonial period tried to educate Indian citizens for the purpose of creating employers for their administration. And that somehow continued even in the post-colonial period also. Policy talks about the purpose of education a little differently. It says that, yes, professionals should be, education should prepare professionals, but it equally, in the equal same breath, it also talks about the development of self and how as individuals we grow. So there is an agenda of individual and community connect, individual and nation connect, and individual and global connect. That is the scope of the policy which is talking about. I don't know, but when I spoke with Andrea, I realized that even in Brazil, the content of the curriculum is very, very content-oriented. That was the situation. We are moving towards creating school curriculums which will be more competencies and skills-oriented. So not giving that pressure of learning content only, but also developing competencies and skills which we thought was missing in the earlier system. Creating opportunities for lifelong learning, and this lifelong learning is seen as a community continuum. We have got programs registered, the systemic programs for adult education, because that is also seen as one of the very important parts. So the policy talks about adult education, and there are provisions which are going ahead with that, and we are part of it, like I'm part of it, those procedures also. Creating a system of education. Now, this is one of the most spoken about part of the policy, because the policy says we should have value system should be grounded in Indian ethos, but we should talk about global leaderships and creating those futuristic perspective. So this is something where people are a little confused, how do we do that? Because usually when we talk about global perspectives, we talk about assimilations, we talk about forgetting your cultural roots and becoming that global, part of that global culture. So that's a catch point where we are all struggling. How do we deal with the curriculum and the pedagogies when it comes to this point? The policy has redefined the school structure. Earlier, it was like the white one here. The previous academic structure was 10 years, one block of stage, and then there was this have divided the school education system to be foundation, which is starting from 0 to 3 years. Then we have preparatory, and we have middle, and we have secondary. Why it is important for me to mention this to you here is that because corresponding to every stage, now we are preparing the teacher preparation programs. So we have come up with an integrated teacher education program. We have one for foundation stage, we have another one for preparatory, we have another one for middle, we have another one for secondary. Like I was discussing earlier, with a few of my colleagues here, earlier the pay structure has been like the people in the lower classes were getting less pay, and as you move in the ladder from grade 1 to grade 12, your salaries were increasing, It is the same situation right now, but the policy recommends that every teacher who is teaching any of these children is equally important. So there should be a pay parity in the entire conversation. So that is why, from 2 points of views, from how the teachers will be prepared for this, and how the teaching, the situation, the professional profile of the teachers will be redefined, and the professional competence will be discussed, the pay parity, everything comes in the policy, and that is why the policy is a very interesting document and a very essential document also. These are the chief features. I think I've spoken about most of them. I'll skip it for the time being, and then we can come back to it in case there is any. One thing that I want to talk about is a lot of emphasis on primary education through home language. That's one of the, to understand the language diversity of India. India has around 370 million students who are the school stage student, and we have 105 students who are still out of school, kids, I should say, who are still out of school. So which means it's a big data. It's a big data. We have to bring all these children to the classrooms. One of the reasons why children are dropping out of the school is they're not able to connect with what is happening in the classroom. Their own cultural, their own home cultures and the classroom cultures, they don't match. They are not able to communicate with the teacher. So that connection, homeschool connection is missing. And that is where it has been proposed that the primary education will be in home language. That has its own challenges, but that's the chief proposal. Now, planning and organizational issues and challenges that we have, I thought it's important when we talk about a policy which is yet to be implemented, we got to be looking at it from a critical perspective. We can't always say that everything is good in the policy and we got to be clapping about that. But there are definite issues and challenges when it comes to planning and organization. One of the most important challenge that I feel, maybe it's from my point of view, because I'm a researcher in diversity and inclusion. So I mean, it can be a very individual and personalized comment. But I think creating inclusive school ethos is one of the great challenge. People who are coming to the school, the teachers, the support staff, the students, they're all coming from different cultural background. They all have different socialization experiences, and that is why they all bring a different value system to the classroom or to the school. How do we deal with that? How do we tell everyone that you got to be inclusive, you got to be respecting each other equally? I think that's one of the biggest challenge, and that is something where we need to work with the children, their families, teachers, and school administration alike. Medium of instruction, language diversity, amazing, very good. Now the children can go to the school, they can study, they'll have a conversation in their own language. But every language does not have that syntax and vocabulary where the formal subjects can be provided to. So that's one of the things. Another important thing is that higher education, when this child passes out from a primary school and the child goes to a middle school, what is the possibility? Are we planning to have curriculum in indigenous or in home language across the school, then to higher education, or there will be a shift to medium of instruction at some point of time? This is something which is yet to be decided, but it is a contingent point that we need to look up for. Gender diversity is an important part. Sergi asked for a data only related to women, girls. So we have just provided you the girls data with regard to the overall. But there is a typical problem of having people with differential gender identities in the school. It's not a very open society from that point of view. Children who come there, especially they are dropping out of schools, transgender, especially after the secondary sexual growth started happening and their identifications become more visible to the people around them. So gender diversity is one thing which we have been contesting with. There have been legal intervention into this, and now we are working towards having schools more open to people with different gender identity. So society couldn't do anything, the government couldn't do anything, so the legal system has dropped in and said that provide equal opportunities for all. Education of children with special needs, we are working on it, but we need to do good. We are not very good. We are not doing it very well. The numbers are very high, as I've just said, and that goes with the high dense what we just crossed China in the most popular in the most highly populated country, you know. So the numbers are a challenge. ICT is another challenge which is presented by the policy. How to use ICT in schools is becoming a great it's becoming a challenge, you know, because sometimes ICT is used as a fancy inclusion in the classroom. It is not required. Like if I want to teach Newton's second law or first law to the child, I can simply drop something and tell them. I don't need to have a PPT for it. I don't need to have any other kind of ICT. Like I don't mean PPT is ICT, but what I'm trying to say is that there are many things for which I don't need an ICT mechanism. So how do we judicial use of ICT, and of course the values and ethics which are related with ICT are extremely critical for us. As we are all talking about, all of us who are sitting here, we come from very ancient civilizations. We have our own knowledge system. How the knowledge systems, the different knowledge systems become a part of the classroom and become a part of the students' value system, that is another important challenge that we are facing right now. There were just a couple of asterisks that I put. I thought I can explain them up. This is the way forward, the last slide, which I had prepared. I thought we can have a few brainstorming points. Since I'm talking from the point of view of teacher education, I just thought that having a BRICS University of Teacher Education, which can be physically located at some place in one of the countries, and all of us from other countries, we can come up, use AI and ODL and ICT to be the faculties over there. So I just thought that if we want to have some kind of a transformation in school education, it should start from teacher education, the kind of teachers that we are preparing, and how they would be relevant in the given context of evolving geopolitical as well as social context of the BRICS countries. I also want to propose certain joint projects on the themes like language dictionaries for Indian, Russian, Chinese, South African, and Brazilian languages. Of course, we can make it BRICS Plus. But certain terms that we can learn or the kind of communication that we can do through it. Language projects for promoting ancient cultural languages like Sanskrit in our context, Russian. So I'm told that Sanskrit and Russian are close, there are certain kind of similarities. I'm not a person of education, I don't want to claim anything, but those are the indications which I got from the people in education, in language education. Chinese and languages of, Brazil and South Africa. We can all come together and create certain kind of work on this. ICT in school education, of course, including focusing on new technologies, ethics, and values. We have had a whole session on this and in the BRICS Civil Forum, and we got to be looking at it. I also want to propose certain kind of summer programs, short duration certificate courses, when we can come together, we can identify themes, and we can work ahead and work on this. Thank you so much. This is just a kind of, a kind of a sentence which I wanted to leave with. I kind of, under some thought pattern, I kind of wrote it on July 25th, 2023. Being different is natural. Disagreements represent thoughtfulness. Unconditional mutual respect for each other as a core value will generate harmony, which necessitates that each one of us evolve to a level of consciousness where differences and disagreements do not lead to disrespect. Thank you so much. It is an amazing experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Saxena. And we'll continue. And I'd like to give the floor for Professor Lange.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would you prefer here or there?
Yes, no, thank you.
Okay.
So I need to move. Okay, because of my background, I'm very biased towards rurality. So mine is rurality as an example of BRICS challenges and opportunities. Okay, the presentation is focused on three statements or questions. What is the influence of place or context in education? What do we want to achieve for rural schools or for schools? What is ideal rural education? And the third one, towards a place, context-sensitive approach to development of rural education policies. I use rural mostly because 80% of our schools in South Africa are rural. So I always say whatever works in a rural school will work anywhere else. Sometimes I use rural and put it in brackets because I'll be talking about schools, not just rural schools. So what is the influence of context? This is just South Africa at a glance. We are 60 million in population. Very balanced with female and male gender, 51% to 49%, which is very rare. A family average of 3.3, which is actually 3. And we have 9 provinces that are sort of using the semi-federal system, and we have 12 official languages. We're very proud that sign language for the deaf is now an official language in the country.
Wow.
When we talk about inequalities in South Africa, this is a very popular picture that is usually used. We have inequalities within the country, and we also have inequalities within the provinces. We also have inequalities, there's rural and urban. We also have inequalities within rural and within urban. This is a picture that was taken in Cape Town. It's an urban area. As you can see, it's divided by one road. There's extreme poverty on the right, as you can see, informal settlements, shacks, and on the left, it's suburbs, beautiful houses with swimming pools, and they are all in one area. So it sort of explains the situation in our country. Poverty, diversity, we can see that I wanted here to highlight on unemployment, which is very, very high. And I always think that education can play a very important role in ensuring that we don't only produce learners, students who look for work, but who also generate work and employ people. And that's what we are working towards. I always talk of sustainable development goals in a very critical manner. We're sitting on 33% of the targets. And we're not a failing country, but the question I always ask is, are SDGs relevant to us, to our own context, in our own countries? Can we really say that this is what we want to work towards? Nothing is over 40%, as you can see. The best is 33%. Are we then failing as countries? You know, does it really speak to what we want to work towards as BRICS countries? Rural schooling, a challenging context. I use a question mark there because my belief is that there are a lot of challenges in rural schools. However, there's a lot of potential that is untapped, positive things that we can use to turn around rural areas. They are characterized by poverty, hunger, poor infrastructure, you name it. No transport, as you can see, no sanitation, and it's not exaggerated. This is more than 50% of our schools that are experiencing this one. So what do we want to achieve for our schools? What is the ideal rural education or ideal rural education for the country? Okay, I'm not going to dwell much on this because this depends on context as well. Free education, we've had that as a country for most of our schools. About 70% of our schools are free. Learners can just go there. We're building beautiful schools. We're big on entrepreneurship. You know, we say that for 0 to 4-year-olds, they need to learn with play. We've recently adopted early childhood development. So basic education in my country doesn't start from grade 1 to grade 12 anymore. Doesn't start in year 7, in age 7 rather, to 18, but it starts in year 0 now. Okay, and this is what I think is ideal. For me, context is very important, place is very important. So it should play a very important role in whatever we do in education. There's a project that we did on linguistic diversity. From grade 1 to grade 3, all learners are taught in their mother tongue, in home language. However, there isn't much resources around that. There's scarcity in reading books. If you go to a library, it's mostly English that is exaggerated, that is catered for. With all the other 9 home languages or indigenous languages, there are few resources. So we did this project, it was embraced. We produced about 340, working with the University of Pretoria, 340 books in indigenous language. The response to this project was huge because the books spoke to mother tongue. Another one is place-based knowledge, cultural diversity. Culture is very important. We usually have a one-size-fits-all curriculum. Content is a one-size-fits-all. We're not really biased towards culture, and people respond well to their culture. So we're thinking that what is the answer here is educational cultural arts and games. We need to teach our young people about so many trees that we have in South Africa that have meaning in medicinal purposes and also just for enjoyment. We also have old people who do beads and they do paintings, drums, music is very big. But that doesn't find interpretation in our schools. So we're saying that should form part of. People are using agriculture also as for food security. It's happening in rural areas, but you find that with agricultural education, it's not that big. So we're not really speaking to the needs of our people when it comes to education. Place-based knowledge, relevant curriculum. In most rural areas, which is 70% of our schools, agriculture is a means of living. You know, they have their own food gardens. It's what they know. It's what our young people know. However, it doesn't find expression in the curriculum in most of the rural schools because running an agricultural school is very expensive. So most of our learners from poor socioeconomic backgrounds are not in agricultural schools. Very few. It's actually, agricultural schools are actually for the elite, for the rich, because we can. But we ran this project in one of our schools when we got sponsorship, and it was received warmly. The school produced eggs. We bought a layers house for them. They were selling eggs to the community. So there was connection between the community and the school. They also had gardens, and they were selling vegetables to the community. They were taught about how to take care of their livestock. So it got very positive reviews, and I think that it's what should feature in the curriculum. So what do I mean when I say towards a place or context-sensitive approach to the development of rural education policies? In fact, to the development of any policy, we need to consider context, we need to consider place. At the moment, we're using a one-size-fits-all, and it's biased towards the few, towards those who have money, towards those who are elite. So that is what needs to change, and I'm sure there are similarities in BRICS plus countries as well. So it's something that we can embrace as a collective. When we were developing, I'm responsible for rural education. So for the first time when I got there, we developed a rural education policy, which is called a national framework for rural education. And we did it the other way around. Most of the time when we develop policies, it's top-bottom, right? We come with a policy and we just ask for inputs and for comments. This time around, we said, let's go to rural communities and speak to the people. So it was bottom-up. The whole policy, I take pride in saying it's the voices of rural communities. We spoke to the parents, to the learners, to the community leaders, and to the school governing bodies and say, how would you want us to assist you as rural schools? And it worked very well. And the conceptual framework that we use is that one. Rurality is a space that is important. We need conducive environment, full of opportunities. We also acknowledge civic agencies, that the people in rural spaces have the potential to turn their lives around. They have that ability. We're just not giving them a chance. We're also saying that existing indigenous knowledge systems that can be used, and they should be part of our conversation in education. So it's three focused areas that we looked at: social connectedness, connecting schools and rural communities, self-esteem. For now, rural is regarded as backwards, as something that is negative, but we're saying, let's have a high regard for rural areas. Let's have teachers who, when they work in rural areas, they're proud of being teachers, they're proud of being learners. At the moment, it's not happening. So we need to move away from shame and distrust that is associated with rural schools. And the most important one where government comes in is functional services, where we're saying support in providing teachers and learners access to quality services. For now, there's absence in that. Rurality is considered a dysfunctional context for development. So what do we mean exactly? We came up with a theory that's a place context-sensitive approach in policy development, not only in rural spaces, but in education. One, it should have an approach that is consultative. In other words, we consult the people. We don't just sit down in our beautiful offices and write policies. We need to consult thoroughly the school communities, like we did with the National Framework for Rural Education. Speak to the teachers, speak to the learners, speak to the senior management team. We also consult rural communities as well, community leaders, parents as well. We're also saying policy development should be evidence-based. But we shouldn't just use research. We should use action research and participatory research, where it's the people that we are developing policies for who are actively involved in the development of that policy. So this kind of research will give them a chance to do that. And again, we are saying that policy development should be context-specific. We should consider the culture of the people we are developing policies for. It should be culturally relevant. We should also consider the context, the place, the space. Who are these people? What are their needs? And they should inform us what their needs are. So if we can all use this approach in policy development, we will then develop policies that are relevant and that are implementable. We're sitting with very good policies that when people read them and say, these are very good policies, but they are not implementable. We're not implementing them. So it's same as the Sustainable Development Goals. Who compiled all of that? Were we part of that compilation? Did they ask our needs for our needs? Did they consider the context where we live in our countries before they came up with all those beautiful goals that we are now told we have to attain? So for me, that is very, very important. So that's references, and yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So much, Professor Lenga, for your presentation and your expression.
Sorry, I speak with my hands.
Absolutely, good. Colleagues, I should change my role, and now I'm a presenter, not moderator, and I'll present the vision of transformation of Russian general education system. This presentation is prepared with my colleagues, you can see it. Just a moment. Будьте любезны, нашу российскую, да? Okay, okay. The interests of the present and future of the country determine the goals of the general education system transformation. The characteristics of Russia as a country, along with its development vectors, prioritize and specify these tasks. Russia is not just a large country in terms of scale of territory, but it has 11 time zones, and its territory is distinguished by a wide variety of geographical, cultural, and demographic conditions. About 50% of our territory has unfavorable natural conditions, and Russian society is characterized by pronounced ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, with more than 155 languages, and interregional socio-economic disparities are significant. Of all the BRICS countries, Russia has the greatest contrast of the level of economic development across its region. It's important to note that on a global scale, the most pressing challenge for the Russian Federation today is demographic. We observe that the population is increasingly dominated by older age groups. By January the 3rd, the country's population is projected to decrease from 140 million to 139 million people, by more than 400,000 people per year, and there may be 500,000 fewer students by 2036. Preserving the country's connectivity, ensuring sustainable development, and saving the population are the key strategic goals of Russia today. Hence, for decades, accessibility, quality education for every child, regardless of whether they live in the highlands or beyond the Arctic Circle, in a village or in a city, have remained a key goal of education policy. Last 5 years, more than 1,300 new schools were built for more than 1 million children in most regions. Students and some rural areas are provided with school buses, and modern STEM equipment is delivered to these schools by mobile laboratory buses. More than 350 of these buses haven't been launched in recent years, and all schools are provided with high-speed internet. However, the teacher remains the main figure, and the program of financial incentives for attracting teachers, Zemsky Teacher, is being implemented to ensure that even in remote areas and the smallest schools, there is no shortage of teachers. Like many other countries, Russia faces a shortage of teachers in school. The government is taking measures aimed at increasing the attractiveness of the teaching profession. The progress in enduring equality does not fully correlate with equity. Every child, regardless of their background, should receive a high-quality education tailored to their abilities and interests. To overcome existing differences, a project to support low-performing schools has been implemented in recent years. Now we also faced with the challenge of growing internal migration of the population, especially young people from a number of strategically important regions. Regional labor markets and key industries are experiencing increasing labor shortage. It is important not only to maintain the integrity of the country, but also to develop the territories in the interest of the quality of life of the population, the prosperity of the country. Those why the presence of a kindergarten, a good school, a various extracurricular activities in the place of residence in what preserves and attracts human labor resources to the most remote areas and supports the motivation to have children. In the context of demographic crisis, every child becomes valuable, not only for their family, but also to the country. Maximizing the potential and supporting the talents of every child is the main goal of the state's educational policy for the coming decades. Since 2018, a center for working with talented children has been created in every region of Russia. More than 50% of children participate in contests and competitions in various fields. National Olympic Games and competitions provide the opportunity for winners and runners-up to enter university with preferences. With regard to attention to ethnic and cultural diversity, in 2023 it is possible to study entire subject or individual topics in 83 native languages in Russia. Extracurricular education includes folk dances and music, national sports and crafts. A country is not only space, but also time, history and culture. The country's connectivity is ensured not only by trains, planes, internet and mobile laboratories, but also by traditions and values. In the last 7 years, we have seen growing attention from authorities and society to civil and value education issues. Social responsibility, patriotism and civic identity are considered education outcomes not less important than reading and mathematical literacy and creative and problem-solving thinking. Special lessons on the basics of value and moral education, land ban, defense of the motherland are included in the curriculum. The amount of teaching time of the history of the country has been significantly increased. Every school now has programs for value education and a specific position for a guidance counselor. Outside of schools, a National Public Association of Children and Youth has been created. It offers a variety of activities for children, volunteering, social service, sports, tourism, and media. To love your country means to know it in all its scale and diversity. Since last year, a national program of educational travel and exchanges of students between regions of the Russian Federation has been launched to familiarize students with history, culture, and industry. The state also views school as crucial for demographic policy. The introduction of classes to educate family values and literacy now is planned. The other aspects, technological sovereignty. Leadership in the field of science and technology has been among Russia's development priorities over the past decade. Obviously, the human resources component plays an important role in this. Today, in the context of sanctions, demographic crisis, and an aging cohort of professionals, his task has become more complex and is now formulated as an enduring technological sovereignty. Its solution must begin not as before at the level of vocational education, but already in schools. Today, a small number of less successful high school graduates are entering STEM undergraduate programs. A policy is being pursued to strengthen career learning and STEM in schools and out of schools education. Special STEM centers in schools and out of schools have been created to support it. Extra STEM education covers more than a quarter of all those involved in extracurricular education. An ecosystem of national competitions in science and technology has been created, including competitions in the field of artificial intelligence. The issues discussed in our presentation have been implemented within the framework of National Project Education since 2018, but this year, national projects were reassembled and new interventions until 2030 will be incorporated into the National Project Youth and Children, Family, Human Resources for Economy. Thus, on one hand, education in Russia today is reoriented in its goals and content towards traditional values, morality, and service to society. This, in a certain sense, is a return to the framework of school education used before the revolution and the involved version seen in the USSR. On the other hand, the global trend of the 21st century continues to be supported. Education should prepare for the future, for life, work and creativity in the context of new technologies and new type of economy, and teach learning throughout life, not also using artificial intelligence. And in these contradictions, we think not. In patriotic education and service learning, we see resource for motivating engagement in different thematic tracks. High quality knowledge and skills in science and technology, as well as a digital literacy, indeed retain their value. However, their use is no longer seen primarily for individual success, but also for the prosperity of the country. We now view the country and local labor markets rather than the global world and labor markets as the primary venues for realizing human potential and applying talents. One of the indicators of achieving the national development goals of Russia by 2030 is the proportion of young people who see opportunity for self-realization within the country. Do we see a divergence in the transformation of Russian education in this direction from the vectors of movements of other BRICS countries? We think no. With regard to STEAM education, it is clear that these priorities are shared by all countries. Combining efforts, including in research, will help us find effective didactic and organizational solutions. As for focusing on values and traditions, we believe that we are not isolating ourselves, but uniting our generation with the global community that is committed to these values. In this regard, dialogue with the BRICS countries, BRICS communities is very important for us. Thank you. For your questions and comments, you could up your hand, please.
So, Professor, just now I noticed that you mentioned, I think it's grade 9, you have about like over 40% of students go to the vocational organizations, and at the level grade of 11, about like 30%. Do you have any kind of like the policy to encourage students to go to the vocational organizations, or it's just their own willing to go to?
Thank you so much. We have a great discussion about the reasons of these trends. And in my opinion, we have two reasons: the balance between the families and students' willingness, and encouraging and special policy of our government. From the other hand, now people don't believe in higher education so much like before. They are looking for the most direct way to the labor market. Yeah, really, we see it in our survey. The other reason is our unified state exam. It's a high stakes exam. You have the same in China. And if students don't want to pass this type of exam, they go after the 9th grade to the vocational education. But from the other hand, last years we had a large-scale project of our government, Professionalitet, which changed infrastructure of our vocational education colleges to improve connection vocational education with employees and to change the curriculum of vocational education, to connect the content, knowledges with real practice, with real labor markets needs.
Thank you. Very, very.
Thank you for your question, please.
Thank you. Really, I very much appreciating the education system of Russia. You have correctly observed that most of the students now they are looking for labor market. And vocational education and lifelong employability means reskilling because of application of technology, artificial intelligence. One particular skill is not going to keep one employable lifelong. So this should be also part of main education stream. It is mostly missing. So how this can be take away to rest of the countries is one aspect. Second, what about dropout rates in Russia and how you people are addressing that one? Because dropout, especially in BRICS countries, it is very high. And those who are going out of education, they are joining workforce. And again, same issue comes, continuation of their education and skill. So this traditional way of education, it is unable to reach them. So can we find other means? Means if by adopting technology, until we are designing how to reach education and training at workplace, if it is not coming to the domain of education, it is going to be very difficult to reach all. So this important aspect is missing. I looks after workers' education. So I am very much familiar with this. If you ask one worker to come for 4 days training, 5 days training, then issue comes, what will happen to their bread for these 4-5 days? So can we find solution reaching at workplace for training and rest of the purposes? And quality of education, see correctly the trained the teachers and mostly private organizations are in the education area. So quality of education has totally gone down. And governments are unable to feed the financial need of the institutions. Big institutes are now crying for the funds. So no society can be the happiest society if one is not educated. If one is not educated, he cannot able to earn livelihood properly. And if we are not feeding the basic need means if educational institutes are not funded properly, so how it can happen? So can we find the role of society also? A number of issues are here, and I think education is the basic concern needs to be addressed for the quality society, for the quality human life, whatever it is.
Thank you so much. The issues you've mentioned are very important not only for Russia, but I think it may be very important for our common report. In Russia, we have a great discussion how to support employability of young people, one of the way to support vocational education, but you're absolutely right, it's not the unique or silver bullet decision. We should discuss education in connection with the situation on labor market, the transformation of labor market and technology. Thanks a lot. I hope we'll continue this discussion now and again. People?
Extended part of this question only. In India, when we started with the skill education and it became, we have a skill council for doing it, you know. We have started doing this in a more organized way. It was fought back with the resistance, saying that now you are making formal education as an elitist agenda, and the people who do not have or who have less resources, you want to convert them into laborers and not providing those opportunities for higher education, and so the blue-collar jobs and you know all those kind of things. Is that kind of phenomena Have you witnessed that kind of a phenomena?
I think that the questions about skills is strongly connected with the questions about inequality and the social structure and social mobility. We see the difference between social structure in India, Russia, China, but in every country we should find the way to support education like a social lift. Frankly speaking, we see that most of those students who go to vocational education are students from the low-income families.
Yeah.
And we see that graduates from the best universities are students from high-income families. That's why in this situation, the role of long life learning and training are crucially important. And it's a question about the responsibility, state or private sector, who is responsible for it, because the resources of families and workers are not enough to support this long life learning or long learning. I think we should continue discuss it. Maybe we should, in our report, to integrate in it one chapter about the connection between basic general education and vocational education. I'm grateful to you for such sort of questions and maybe sort of requirements for our common work. Colleagues, please, Professor Lange.
Thank you. I have two questions, one to Brazil and the second one to India. My interest is on policy development, right? Because I believe that we need to use an approach that will make our policies work, where we get a buy-in from the people who would be implementing those policies. And the only way I believe that where we can get a buy-in is when they become part of policy development holistically, right? So you spoke about capacity planning with popular participation. And the question is, in a very big community of people in the education, which model do you use to choose who participates? And is participation fairly done? And who then becomes the person who determines who should be part of this process? The one for India is you recently developed and adopted a national education policy in 2020. And you said you have moved from content-based to competency-based. We are currently doing a similar exercise in South Africa, but it's for the curriculum. We're trying to strengthen the curriculum and make it more competency-based than content-based. And the question that I have is, who was part of the development of this policy? Which approach did you use? And vis-a-vis, what is the response from the people now, the education community that have to now implement this policy? Are you getting positive reviews? Are people buying in to the new policy? Is there resistance? And do you also connect that with how the policy was developed?
Thank you. The question of the participation is very important for us. And I think this is a very good experience in Brazil. We have a large, I don't know tradition, but for our tradition, it's a different strategies for put the people together. In this moment, we have a very strong national conference of education for 4 years. And the strategy, it's beginning in the municipalities with the teachers, the parents, the social movement, and this level choose delegates for the states, and in the states, we choose delegates for the national. And for how this system worked, we have a draft, a basic document. In this draft, it's negotiated with representatives of national movements. This is top-down, but it's a coordinated national process. And it's a very, very strong process. I need a little example. In one municipality with 2,000 people, very small in Brazil, we have, for example, 200 people together discusses. Of course, in the capitals, in the big cities, it's a very relation. It's not done stronger, but it's very important. It's a line for see the education policy in Brazil. We have others problems, challenges. Life is connected, but the participation is very important. And it's closed with other forms of participation in the scholar levels and in the other connections. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the question. We start with the process, first of all, that how the policy was formulated. We can say it's a mix and match of, I would not say top-down, but it's a mix and match of the government consolidation of the ground realities. In the sense that we did have a board for national education policy was constituted, somebody is the chair of that, and there were people who were part of it. So there was a group of people who were chosen to kind of prepare the policy. But at the same time, the voices of the people have been collected through systematic process. So that is why when we read the policy, we can see that the ground realities and the voices of people, if I can use the word common people, are reflecting into it. So there was a systemic process where the civil societies and the government organizations were kind of, they did that kind of a groundwork, collecting what are the gaps, what does the community want, and what are the different kind of, even this idea of language came in from there, that why children are dropping out because of that kind of disconnect with the homeschool kind of disconnect that was happening. In almost around 1970s, we came up with a midday meal policy where it was, I don't know, the then government probably felt that if we provide food to the children, they'll probably come to the school and they will be attracted to the school. But food did not attract them. It did attract them to school because there were areas of starvation, but it did not motivate them to learn. So, there was no connection between getting food and learning. So I think those nuances, the older schemes which have been tried, there have been a critical appraisal and study of those schemes also, that why despite the fact the schemes are around 50 years old, the dropout rate is still very high. That was just an example I'm giving you. There are multiple other such schemes which were launched in the last years, and a critical appraisal of those schemes was also done, that why they're not working. So put together, everything was consolidated, a draft document was prepared, and this draft document has been for discussion on the website for around 8 months. The people's response were invited, they could talk about it, and then there was a reconsideration, and then finally the policy was adopted in 2020. So it's been a long process, more than 2 years, which has taken up, which the entire process took, and that's how the voices are included. The response. The response has been mixed. You know, because the policy talks about community life, the policy talks about things like professor of practice, that if you're very good in poetry, you can become a professor in the university and you start teaching poetry to the people. If you're very good in sculpture, you can be appointed as a faculty. And our University Grant Commission actually has got a website, a link on it where they have names of professor of practice. So these are not essentially the people who are academicians, but they could be attached with any kind of art or cultural, any art form. They could be industrialists who are not formal PhDs who can become the faculty, but they are good, they can bring in those kind of entrepreneurship and things like that. So these kind of proposals, plus the proposal of indigenous knowledge system, I think value system, students being responsible for what they're doing, becoming a responsible citizen. Somewhere down the line, these kind of things have found a kind of resistance, because it looks like that we will not be able to stay in the global picture. We would become backward. The policy is trying to take us 5,000 years back, which is not happening. So values are seen in a very dramatic manner of historically degenerating societies or something like that, as if the societies which existed 5,000 years ago were degenerated as compared to the 2024 society. So that kind of a mindset, the westernized mindset which has come up, you know, we are combating that in the system at this moment. So the resistance came in two ways. One is the idea-based, and second is the finance-based. That if you are asking for so many things, the policy is a very aspirational policy, where will the fund comes from? So the policy talks about certain kind of funding. For example, gender fund, the policy talks about that we will set up a gender fund. There's a separate fund which is set up for skill education. There's a separate fund which is set up for ICT. So the government is trying to do that, but it is that kind of a mistrust, I can say, which says that, oh, no, this will not be enough for the way you are talking. So those are the two resistances that we have found basically from the people. Largely, people are inclined into it and they're working into it. But I would not say that the percentage of people who do not agree is very less. So there's a considerable number of people who are fighting or contesting it on those grounds which I just shared with you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Maybe two questions.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the speakers for the captivating tour around the BRICS education systems with their unique background and strategies. But I also guess that you find there are things that you may learn from other BRICS countries' systems. First question, do you have any particular patterns that at the moment you can announce you would like to learn from other countries, having listened to the speakers? And the second, if there is such an exchange between the educators, what educators from other BRICS countries you find the most interesting and fruitful to invite to your country in order to strengthen your system and the development? Thank you.
Thank you for such brilliant question.
I cannot answer this question, but your question reminds me what I want to express or share with you. The strong impression after I listening the speeches, I realized that we are so different. Sometimes we have the different challenges at the different education levels. Even at the same education level, we face the very different problems. So that gives me a very strong impression. I give a small example. As Professor Sergey said, Russia encouraged the extra curriculum program. No, in China, we just regulate that because parents are irrationally crushed on this. They just, occupy the children's extra out of school's time. So we regulate that. So it's so different. That's very interesting ideas. But after that part, I also have a second part is we are so same. Of course, all the people we are sitting here, we are just want to have the high quality education. Yeah, we are same. And we are also developing and emerging very rapidly. And we are all very so complicated inside of our countries. So I think it's very interesting. So at the end, I still cannot answer your question, but I want to end this that if BRICS can solve these problems, can solve these differences, or can emerge these differences, can accept the differences, the concept of the BRICS are the real voice to the world, are the real voice of the world. That's what I'm thinking. Sorry, I cannot answer a question, but I really like your question. I want to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful answer.
Thank you very much for sharing your presentations. The question for everybody, actually, but Professor Fang mentioned in her presentation that the system been going through constant reform for the last 20 years, very similar to Russia, actually. So very small, easy question. How do you make sure that reform is really happening in practice? Do you have any recipes or maybe instruments? And can you share them? And reform is happening everywhere, not on paper, but in every classroom as well.
This is not an easy question. We can say from the central government to the province, to a provincial government to the schools, they have different levels of policies and tactics. That's a whole system. And from the top to the down, from the down to the top, we have a system on that. I cannot explain it very simply. And we also do the evaluation, on these strategies. So I think the reason or the system or the circle, the logic of the government will moderate the strategies, how it's going, and then just modify it, reform it. So it's not very easy to answer that, but really we have a very systematical monitoring system on that. Of course, we cannot we implement all the strategy goals, but we are making progress. I think that's the important part. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, colleagues. We should finish our session because you need a chance to have a dinner and to take a common photo. But I see that the issues of our discussions and the questions of our report are very interesting for all our community. It's inspired me. I'm grateful for all your presentation. They are well based on evidence and your deep expertise. They were outspoken and sometimes even provocative. It seems to me that we are already enriching each other with the lessons of past reforms and a vision of the future. We are different, but we see many similarities in our challenges and opportunities. We are interested in each other. The most important, we're all together here, and then thank you so much. Thank you for your attention, for your interesting questions, and let's follow to take a photo, but